What's good, yo? Welcome back to the Playmakers Corner podcast. I'm your co-host for today, Simon Villanos, a.k.a. Coach V.
I am another one of your co-hosts, Kodey Stoffert.
And I'm your last co-host, Mazen Austin.
And welcome to the 2A End of the Year award show here. We're going to talk about Newcomer of the Year, Offensive Playmaker of the Year, Defensive Playmaker of the Year, Most Valuable Playmaker of the Year. I'm going to go ahead and go over our process real quick, just in case you didn't listen to our 1A End of the Year award show, which, you should go ahead and check out. It's not super long. But basically, there's 5 votes total. Each of us here, there's 3 of us here hosting the show, have 1 vote, so that's 3 of the 5. And then Anthony Garcia from Milehigh Prep Report, he has followed 1A and 2A a whole ton this year, obviously. Go ahead and check out his website. He put his picks on there like a couple weeks ago, so if you want to check that out, go for it. He also covers sports, like all sports, for 1A, 2A, 3A, all the small town sports. So if you want to check that out, because I know basketball season is going on right now, go for it. But he is going to be our 4th vote, and then the 5th vote is you, the fans. So basically, whoever won the majority of the fan vote gets the fan vote there. And so you, the fans, did vote on that. We appreciate everyone who voted on those polls. Some of those votes are going to decide who wins some of these awards because it was pretty close here. And so we are going to go ahead and hop into Newcomer of the Year. This goes to the best freshman performance on the varsity level in 2A. And so, not just one performance, but throughout the entire season. And so I'm going to go ahead and throw it to our guy Mason Austin to talk about one of the first finalists for Newcomer of the Year. But Mason, go ahead.
Yeah, so for our first finalist, getting 58% of the vote is Ty Reed, quarterback from Delta High School. He had 914 yards, 13 passing touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. He completed 42 out of 80 of his passes, which is just over 50%, and he had a passing yards of 101 yards per game. That's basically all the stats we have for this guy. He definitely got it done for this Delta squad. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Kodey to talk about our next guy.
Yeah, so thank you, Mason, for filling us on Ty Reed, a playoff game-winning quarterback as a freshman, by the way. So, there's a reason that he has that much clout. But this next guy I'm going to talk about here, I think that he's actually helping turn around the entirety of a program on 2A, and that is Alameda's very own Tez Glover. Now, if you look back at last year, it was kind of weird, obviously, because of COVID and whatnot, but Alameda did not win a single game last year. They had to play in a modified Patriot West League, and they scored 2 touchdowns all year, and every team that they faced scored over 47 points. It was a rough year for Alameda football. Flash forward to this year, they're on the up and up. They went 3-6, which, it's not a perfect record. It's not a playoff record. However, it is a drastic improvement from last year, and I think that they're going to continue to trend forward. I think you could tell kind of this season that they got hit by COVID a little bit harder near the end of the season. But, they were able to get some wins this year, and that was in huge part thanks to this freshman, Tez Glover. He's running back and cornerback, but he's here for his cornerback play as a Newcomer of the Year. He balled out this year. At corner, he had almost 50 tackles, including 6 for loss, which is just kind of unheard of for a cornerback to play that strong in the run game. So, that was obviously pretty impressive. Not to mention he had 3 hurries at cornerback. So, they send him on a few slot cornerback blitzes and whatnot. And, that's also part of the reason why he was able to get some of those tackles for loss. And, if you thought, oh, this guy's a run-only corner, he's not. He had 2 interceptions, 2 pass deflections, as well as a caused fumble on the year. So, he kind of did it all at the cornerback position. And, in those games that they won, he played a huge part of it. In their season opening win over Jefferson, he had 9 tackles, including 1 for loss. In their 1-point win over Valley High School, who has, a candidate for one of our awards coming up. He had 14 tackles and 2 for loss in that game and went just pretty dummy. And then in a 55-0 win over Pinnacle, he had 5 tackles as well. And in that Jefferson game, he had an interception and a pass deflection. And in the Valley game, he had a forced fumble, which, in a 1-point game could be the, game-changing play or what have you in what was a pretty exciting game from the film I watched from the 2 players, by the way. And so, being able to change a program and a culture like that is a huge reason why Tez Glover is one of our newcomers of the year. Now, I'm going to pass it on to another guy who's trying to change a culture in that kind of Denver area as a newcomer. And Simon, if you want to introduce that player and kind of talk about why he is on our newcomer of the year list.
Yeah, so that guy is from D'Evelyn High School, like you said, in Denver, Kodey. And I'm just going to say this right now. I apologize if I say your name wrong. I probably should have messaged you before this, but that is defensive end / lineman, Khafre Fiadanu. I'm going to just go ahead and call him Fiadanu here. This dude was an entire beast. First off, he's built at 6'2". I don't know how much he weighs, but at 6'2", this kid is a beast. And he got snaps on varsity pretty much since the beginning of the season. Their first game, unfortunately, was against a really tough Severance team on August 27th. But he got in there. He recorded a tackle, but, he definitely got stronger down the line as he did finish the season with 50 total tackles, 20 tackles for losses, which you don't see. Jeez, dude. He probably could have been in the, in our talks for defensive playmaker of the year, but he'll get 3 more chances. Yeah, because 20 tackles for losses. I think Ryan Dirksen has that, and that's it. Because that's absolutely insane to get that many tackles in the backfield. But sack-wise, he does have 7 sacks, including an excellent 4-sack performance and 1 hurry against Englewood, where they beat them 28-26. In that game, he also had 9 total tackles and 4 tackles for losses. Arguably, that was his coming out party right there. And then the signature game, really early on in the season on September 10th. And then he also had that was just the start of his tear, as he did go crazy against Thomas Jefferson, a 3A school, getting 8 tackles, 3 tackles for losses, also a sack in that game. And then after that one, he would basically end his little 3-game streak here against Middle Park going crazy. He had 11 tackles, 6 tackles for losses, and no sacks in that game, but still a very, very good performance throughout the season. He had a lot of tackles for losses, as you just heard, not just in that 3-game stretch, but throughout the whole season. And honestly, for a defensive lineman, for any defensive player to do that as a freshman is extremely difficult to do. And so you got to give him credit there. He's going to be around terrorizing quarterbacks for 3 more years. And so if this is his floor, then his ceiling is going to be insane. And so there you go there. That is, like I said, I apologize if I'm saying your name wrong, but that's Khafre Fiadanu, the defensive end out of D'Evelyn. And now, Mason, do you want to talk about our last finalists here before we talk about the breakdown of some of these votes?
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to go ahead and talk about our last finalist, Jaden Noor out of Berthoud High School. He finished his season with 353 rushing yards, 5 rushing touchdowns, and then 13 total tackles. But if you look at his games, I think his big, kind of coming out party for him was his game against University High School with 214 yards, with a long of a 59-yard rush. So, he definitely got it done in that game. And then, he had some subtle games of, 41 against the Academy and 98 yards against Eaton, which, that Eaton defensive line is not easy to rush through. So that's also, kind of a feat in itself. But if you guys don't mind, is it okay if I go ahead and talk about Anthony Garcia's pick?
Actually, you should save his pick for the end here. How about that?
Okay, that works.
Go ahead. But go ahead with your pick and then talk about the fan vote, though.
Okay, so for the fan vote, They did go ahead and vote with 58% for the quarterback Ty Reed, and I am going to second that. I am also voting for Ty Reed. I think he got it done, on all stages of the ball, and I think he really, as a quarterback for Delta, he is definitely going to be something to watch out for. I'll pass it off to you, Simon.
No, yeah, for sure. Ty Reed was definitely really impressive for me. For me, this one really came down to two players here. Ty Reed, I knew about him all season. Same with Fiadanu, and so they were kind of just going back and forth as the playoffs went on. Well, for Ty Reed as the playoffs went on, and he did have a very good performance. And honestly, 27 total touchdowns as a freshman. That is really hard to ignore. But I think I'm going to have to go with Fiadanu. I know how hard it is to be a freshman playing on the defensive side of the ball, especially if you're a lineman, just because there's an obvious lack of experience there. And, I think that's very hard to do. No disrespect to Ty Reed or anybody else here. Ty Reed was definitely a very close second, and this one came down to the wire for me. But, Kodey, do you want to go ahead and talk about who you are picking for Newcomer of the Year, and then we could talk about the fan vote here?
Well, we'll talk about Anthony's vote.
My bad. Yeah, Garcia's vote.
So, I'm going to have to go with Fiadanu here. No disrespect to Ty Reed, but, Delta is one of those programs that kind of consistently is solid. They have great coaching over there. So I think that, that stability and that kind of elongated success helps out Ty Reed a little bit here over Fiadanu a little bit, just because, last year Delta had, and the year before that, they had Nolan Bynum, who I believe I did a breakdown on actually. So, they do a good job of maximizing their quarterbacks over there at Delta and winning a lot of football games versus Fiadanu kind of walked into an uncertain situation and, a situation that still isn't super solidified at Evelyn. I wouldn't necessarily call them a football school. And so I think that he has the capability of turning that around because, these newcomers of the year, they not only did they have a strong performance as a freshman, but also they are going to revolutionize a program or, change a program for the better. And I think that Fiadanu has that capability being, just a stud on that defensive line. And he's only going to get bigger and he's only going to get stronger and he's going to be a menace. And for sure, look, both of these guys could have honestly been an offensive playmaker or defensive playmaker of the year candidate. So kudos to both of them for having phenomenal seasons. But I'm going to go with defensive here and go with Fiadanu. So should I explain to the fans what Anthony chose as the tiebreaker, or does someone else want the pleasure of doing that? Because currently we have the fan vote for Ty Reed at 58% and Mason's vote for Ty Reed. So that's 2 votes here. Then Simon and I both voted for Fiadanu, who, by the way, had 30% of the vote, so he was the second closest anyway.
Yeah.
Did Anthony take the fan side or the defense or our side? The answer is that Anthony took the fan side here and voted for Ty Reed. Totally understandable. Like Simon said, 27 touchdowns as a freshman is ridiculous. 14 rushing touchdowns, that's amongst even the rushing leaders in 2A football, and then 13 passing touchdowns, 5 picks. I mean, his touchdown to INT ratio is already better than Bynum, who was the 2-year starter. It's still early for career totals and whatnot, but nonetheless, Delta is going to have a good one and will be contending for a championship in the next few years with Ty Reed at the helm.
There you go. Congrats to Delta quarterback Ty Reed. Super excited to watch him play next year. Hoping to catch a game for sure, because I personally think they might be able to push for one in this next year. So we will see about that. But a lot of exciting freshmen here between Ty Reed, Tez Glover, Fiadanu for sure, Jaden Nor even, he had some great performances against some pretty stout teams. And so this is a very strong Newcomer of the Year class finalist list here that we got to put together for the 2A level. So it's in good hands.
Congratulations to everyone who was a candidate for this.
Yes.
Because this one we actually kind of had to whittle down a little bit more, I'd say, than 1A. So, congratulations. And like Simon said, excited to see these guys over the next few years. But with all that being said, we're going to talk about, some of these guys in the next category will be coming back next year, and some of these guys will be graduating coming up. Offensive Playmaker of the Year.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? And welcome back to the Playmakers Corner podcast. We're going to go ahead and talk about the Offensive Playmaker of the Year, and I'm going to start with quarterback Walker Martin out of Eaton High School. He had 1,335 passing yards, 19 passing touchdowns, 8 interceptions, with 560 rushing yards and 9 touchdowns. Some of his signature games were definitely against University in the playoffs. He had 261 yards. Earlier in the season against Severance, he had 102 yards. And then the Academy, he passed for 160 yards and 3 touchdowns in that game. Not to mention in that University game, he did pass for 5 touchdowns, which is insane. That's a, did he win Playmaker of the Week for that, or did we have that?
Wait, which week?
The University week, right before the state final.
Yes, he did.
Yes, he did.
He let loose like 3 long bombs to start off that game.
Yeah, it says his long for that one is 80, so.
Yeah. The other 2 are 60 and 50, so yeah.
He's definitely not a slouch when it comes to, throwing the rock. And so, rushing-wise, his top rushing game was definitely against Elizabeth with 85 yards. And then he had one game against Resurrection Christian with 57 yards. So, he definitely gets it done when he has to with his feet, but his arm is definitely what gets him there. I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Kodey for our next Offensive Playmaker of the Year.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about Cale Schaefer here out of Bayfield. He's just kind of a do-it-all running back for this Bayfield team. He had over 1,000 yards of scrimmage, including 780 out of the backfield, as well as over 300 for rushing. And he had 14 touchdowns just on the offensive side of the ball between rushing and catching the ball. Not to mention, he was able to chip in a little bit on special teams and whatnot, as well as, just helping with conversions. But this Bayfield team, I did a preview of them in the preseason. I was wondering, where were these guys last year? How come I didn't hear about them? Because they have so many great athletes over there, including the likes of Cale. And, they struggled last year with COVID, and Cale was a huge part of this turnaround where, they went 7-2 this year and, lost in the playoffs to Elizabeth in a very tough game, but they still ran the table in their league, going undefeated in league play, and a huge part of that was Cale Schaefer. Obviously, in some of those league games, like against Alamosa, he had 129 yards rushing and a touchdown, not to mention 1 reception for 33 yards. In Pagosa Springs, who was the 2A Southwestern Conference winner last year, so taking the crown from Pagosa Springs, Cale went off this game. He had 3 receptions for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns, not to mention another 62 yards on the ground and a rushing touchdown. So, on just 10 carries, he accounted for 18 points and, 140 yards against, I think a usually solid or at least consistent Pagosa Springs team on this level of football. So, that was huge for him to kind of say, hey, like, there's a changing of the guard here in this conference and in this league, and I'm going to let you know about it. So, just a phenomenal year. Some other games where he kind of popped off included, in the Aztec game, he ran the ball 12 times for 164 yards and 4 scores. So a third of his touchdowns coming in that one game. But on the year, he averaged 7 yards per carry. So it's not like he, disappeared really. And, he had an average reception of 13.3 yards per catch. So, overall solid year, do it all kind of player, helped Bayfield, put on an impressive league winning season. This next player also helped their team win a league title, and I'm going to let Simon talk about it because it's in his neck of the woods, if you would, Coach V.
Yeah, and so I'm going to talk about TCA's very own Cade Palmer. This dude was a beast. He's been a beast for the last couple of years. Definitely somebody who could have made our MVP list, at least in my opinion, just because he really was the focal point for this TCA offense. Like I said, not just this year, but basically for the last 3 to 4 years, because he's been turning up. Last year, unfortunately, didn't end the way they wanted to in state. They lost a rifle, but he did have near 300 rushing yards and multiple touchdowns in that game. Plus, like a solid, I want to say 40 or 50 receiving yards, something like that. Maybe a little bit more. But that was last year. This year, he picked it back up and was the focal point for this TCA offense, as he was a big reason why they were a contender, throughout this whole year. And so on the season, only had 123 carries, which is not a lot. It's not the most amount of carries a workhorse back could have, but he did have 1,541 rushing yards, 23 rushing touchdowns, also snagged 4 passes for 41 yards. Only had 1 fumble this season, and that's one he lost, unfortunately, against Severance in the playoffs. But other than that, a very clean season for Cade Palmer. Another iconic season for the TCA star, Cade Palmer here. Some notable games versus Elizabeth. I think at the time Elizabeth was 2-0. He went crazy against them, had 173 rushing yards and a touchdown on only 11 carries. The most carries he actually had all season was 17. So he never even hit 20 carries this entire season, or 20 touches this entire season. But those 17 carries was against Lamar. He had 17 carries for 178 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns. They would destroy Lamar 70-13 in that game. Against Woodland Park the next week, this was another iconic game. He only had 9 carries. Just keep that in mind. So he only touched the ball 10 times against Woodland Park, because he had a reception for 23 yards. But on 9 carries, he had 237 rushing yards, 4 rushing touchdowns. That means half of his touches went for touchdowns in that game against Woodland Park. And then last but not least, against Manitou Springs, I was actually at this game. He had a chance to break the rushing touchdown record, but I want to say TCA kind of slowed up and pulled him out before the fourth quarter even happened. And so in 3 quarters, he had 12 carries for 168 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns in that excellent game. And so there you go. That's Cade Palmer. He's also the only player on the 2A level that I think is going to a D1 in Air Force. So he'll be joining Alec Falk and his brother there, first off, as well. And so there you go. Congrats to Cade Palmer and whatnot. I'm not even going to lie. I know I've been really critical of TCA, but I have never been critical of Cade Palmer. This dude is a beast. He's always done his thing, and there's no big surprises here, but it's not exactly a huge surprise that he's an offensive Playmaker of the Year candidate or finalist here. But Kodey, do you want to talk about another guy who is, there's no surprises why he's an offensive Playmaker of the Year candidate?
Yeah, sure thing. So, Isaiah Elliott is who I'm going to be talking about now, out of the academy that is located in Westminster. And he lit it up this year, honestly. He's going to be a threat next year because he's only a junior. So keep that in mind. At 5'11", 175 pounds, there wasn't anything that Isaiah couldn't do. He threw for 1,519 passing yards, 16 touchdowns, and then on the ground, he added another 591 rushing yards and 10 touchdowns. So 26 touchdowns on the year, over 2,000 yards from scrimmage. And yeah, he was just a dog. I watched his film actually, I watched all these guys' film when deciding who was going to be my offensive Playmaker of the Year. Because, stats don't tell the whole story. But for, Elliott here, stats don't tell the whole story. Because, you see 500 yards and you're like, okay, that's somewhat similar to a Walker Martin, But, man, he's so freaking fast. Like, when he sticks his foot in the ground, you better be in front of him. Because he's going upfield, and he's going upfield in a hurry. He's just so fast. And his ability to extend plays and, find the open guy downfield is also phenomenal. I think he's a guy who's going to have, kind of a good story kind of year next year where he can really light it up on the scoreboard, but also, potentially be one of the top quarterbacks in the entire state of Colorado. And if you don't know who he is, you got to get him on your radar right now, And so in this year, in some notable games, he, against Kent Denver, who is another playoff team, he went 17 of 23 for 73% completion percentage and 290 yards, as well as 2 passing touchdowns, not to mention his 99 yards on the ground and a rushing touchdown. So, he was in takeover mode that game. And I think that 73% is pretty indicative of just his entire year. He was a very efficient passer, nonetheless, at a 69% completion percentage. Nice. And, just overall didn't make a lot of mistakes this year. Even in games against some tough defenses, he played fairly mistake-free football, against a team like University, who is one of the semifinalists this year. He was able to, compete with them in that game and go. They lost to University 28-41. However, in that game, he still ran for 67 yards and a touchdown. And, he didn't throw an interception or fumble the ball. So playing mistake-free football as well, even in losses, is, very good to see. Oh, my gosh. I don't know how I didn't see this on his stat line. Against Berthoud, he didn't miss a pass. He didn't miss a pass. He went 17 of 17 for 130 yards and 2 passing touchdowns and another 25 yards on the ground. I don't think he played that whole game, / he didn't really need to, because, when you start off 17 for 17 passing, you're kind of doing whatever you want to a defense at that point. And Isaiah Elliott just has that ability to inflict his will on defenses and, ball out. And so I'm really excited for what his senior season is going to bring. And, I'd say that the fans were impressed as well by Isaiah Elliott's performance. He actually garnered, 44% of the vote to win the fan vote and the fans' selection for Offensive Playmaker of the Year on this 2A level in the 21 season. And, so congratulations to Elliott for winning the fan vote. And now I'm going to pass it back to Mason Austin to talk about who he voted for the 2A Offensive Playmaker of the Year.
Yeah, so for my vote, I went ahead and picked the quarterback, Walker Martin, out of Eaton High School. Seeing him in person, you saw just kind of how much of a dog he is. Plus, looking at his statistics and everything, I think that he deserves this Offensive Playmaker of the Year. I'm going to pass it off to Simon to see who he chose.
Sounds good. Yeah, no, Walker Martin for me was definitely up there. I think he was just second behind the guy I picked. And, I would just want to make sure I give Walker the credit he deserves, because this dude, he killed it all year. In that semifinal game, the game that decided whether they go to state, also the last game that they would ever play on that football field. So regardless, this game was going to be important to Eden football history. He won the quarterback duel against University's Greg Garcia. Now, you could say well, it was raining in the fourth and Greg might have had another touchdown. Sure, that's fine. And I have a lot of respect for Greg Garza. He knows we have a lot of love for him. We'll talk about him coming up here soon. But, Walker Martin, he definitely did a lot in that last game on that field for Eden, which was huge. And, that really impressed me. And throughout the season, he gave Eden a whole nother dimension and made them even more dangerous outside of the rushing game there. So there you go. Just want to give him his respect. But I'm going to have to go with my boy, Cade Palmer, out of TCA from Colorado Springs. He carried this team. And, TCA, they decided to give him the keys to the car. He led them as far as he could until they played a team like Severance that knew how to shut down a one-person machine, basically over there. But even in that game, he still had 100 rushing yards. I don't think there was a single game this season he didn't hit 100 rushing yards. So there you go. He didn't even have 20 carries all season as well. It was all below 20 carries, which is absolutely insane. And so Cade Palmer is my pick there. I'm going to go ahead and talk about Anthony Garcia's pick here for Offensive Playmaker of the Year. but he is going to go ahead and go with Cade Palmer as well for a lot of the same reasons. I remember me and Anthony actually talked about Cade Palmer and TCA throughout this season, just messaging each other as the season went on and seeing his stats grow and seeing how well TCA was doing. Granted, it was against a league that did graduate a lot of players last year, but someone has to step up and dominate to become kings of that league. And so Cade Palmer did that for TCA, and he found a way to get it done. And so obviously that's why Anthony went with Cade Palmer here. Like I said, somebody who could have been MVP. But Kodey, do you want to go ahead and talk about who you are picking for Offensive Playmaker of the Year?
Yeah, it's very tempting to make things messy here with one player sitting at 2 votes and the other 2 players who I'd vote for sitting at a vote apiece. And, shout out to Kale Schaefer and that entire Bayfield team and, what he and that Bayfield team accomplished this year. Shout out to Walker Martin for helping Eaton win another state championship and, closing out that Eaton legacy at that field with a dub, as Simon alluded to. And, also shout out to Isaiah Elliott being the do-it-all kind of, the heart of that academy team in Westminster. However, I'm going to keep things boring, and I'm going to have Cade Palmer be my Offensive Playmaker of the Year. He just is so smooth. He's just a smooth running back, and that's something that, I loaded up the film in the first run right away, grabbed my attention, like, oh, his change of direction is easy. He does everything Cade does looks so easy. And, I think that he just had a phenomenal year for this TCA team. I mean, they went undefeated in the regular season, mind you. And a huge part of that is because of Cade Palmer and just what he's able to do. Not only is he a smooth runner and a fast runner, he's pretty strong too. He'll lower his shoulder and go through somebody too. And, I mean, you look at like Simon said, he didn't ever have over 17 carries this entire year and still managed to run for over 1,500 yards because he averaged 12 yards per freaking carry. That's stupid. Like, those are straight up video game Madden numbers. I don't say that often because I think it's said a little too much, but that is straight out of a video game. I mean, 123 carries, 1,500 yards. Look, if you're a college, you need to recruit this guy because he's still fresh. He didn't get burnt up in high school carrying the ball 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700 times. He's ready to go. So I'm going to vote for Cade Palmer here. Oh, and he's going to Air Force is what Simon is informing me as of right now. And they're going to get a great running back there, honestly. And I think that he'll excel in their system. So congratulations to Cade Palmer on that commitment, we're going to say on the air. And congratulations to Cade Palmer for winning our Playmakers Corner 2A Offensive Playmaker of the Year in this Fall 21 season. Now, coming up next, we're going to be talking Defensive Playmaker of the Year. Hi, all. Welcome back to the Playmakers Corner podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Kodey Stafford, joined here by Coach V and Mason Austin talking about our Playmakers of the Year on the 2A level. And on this segment, we're going to be talking Defensive Playmakers of the Year. And I'm going to start off this segment with our number 5 senior linebacker, which if you've not listened to our top 5 2022 senior linebackers list, go ahead and give that a listen. Because at number 5, we had Kodey Connor out of Faith Christian High School located in Arvada. And he played phenomenal this year. He actually led the entire state in tackles for all of Colorado, at least on the 1 through 5A level, with 147 tackles. And yeah, he was the heart and soul of this defense. On top of that, he had 27 tackles for loss, including a 4-game streak to end the year in league play where he had 19 tackles for loss in 4 games. So, he was playing crazy in those games. Not to mention he can also, get some sacks. He had 4 sacks this year as well as 2 hurries. And then, in the pass game, he's not a liability really too much either. He had an interception and a pass deflection. But really, his bread and butter was playing in the run game, as evidenced by all those tackles for loss, 3 fumble recoveries, 2 forced fumbles, and just everything he was able to do for this Faith Christian team. He was the heart and soul of that team. I can't stress it enough. And not to mention, he's a smart kid. He has a 4.15 GPA, a 31 ACT. Now, we talk football, but really it's what you do in the classroom as well is just as, if not more important. So shout out to Kodey there for being an absolute stud in both the, film room and being a smart football player, and then in the classroom, paying attention in class and whatnot. And what an incredible story, honestly. I actually got to talk to Kodey in our DMs, and, he agreed with everything that we had to say, basically, and explained himself a little bit, that he actually was recovering over the summer from a torn meniscus before leading the state in tackles, and that is just insane. He even said, I got cleared a day before the season started, which was 2 months ahead of schedule. So he put in the work over the summer, and, recovering from any injury is really hard. But, I love the story that he has here, that not only he recovered way ahead of schedule and then went on to lead the entire state in tackles and, wasn't playing, I'd say, at 100% for this past football season and still balled out. Not only, on the defensive side of the ball, he's a defensive playmaker of the year candidate, but in addition, he was also running the football for this Faith Christian team and ran for 436 yards and 9 touchdowns. So as far as usage goes, he had one of the highest usage rates, I'd say, in probably all of 2A, and still remained healthy, A, on not 100% health, and B, performed. So shout out to Kodey Connor out of Faith Christian. What an incredible season he had for this Faith Christian team. And now I'm going to pass it off to Simon to talk about another guy who is kind of a heart of sorts and, an enforcer for his defense.
Yeah, speaking of top 5 players, he just barely missed our top 5 safeties list.
So narrowly.
Yeah.
So narrowly.
It was extremely close. And I really wanted him to
he's a top 5 guy. He's a top 5 guy. I'm willing to say that after the postseason.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, he killed it, dude. Honestly, he had so many big performances for the Severance team, and that is Caden Donovan, the senior safety for Severance. I mean, first off, this Severance team, our football program, is like 3 years old. And so he is obviously one of the founding members of this team, and is why they have such a strong culture already, such a strong defensive culture. Like, when Severance comes to town, they finna hit you, and they finna play very disciplined and good defense. And Caden Donovan, he was kind of one of those leaders over there. And also, this Severance team had a lot of players that, just didn't make our list here for Defensive Playmaker of the Year because, we didn't want 4 players from Severance making our Defensive Playmaker of the Year list, which is what almost would have happened, or maybe not 4, probably 3, if, if we allowed more than 2 in here. And so there you go there. But on the season, Caden Donovan, first off, played both sides of the ball. He also had 500 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns. Sorry, almost 600 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns. But on the defensive side of the ball, had 114 total tackles, had 6 interceptions, 2 pass deflections, 2 fumble recoveries, had 3 forced fumbles, which, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, I believe one of those forced fumbles was against our Offensive Playmaker of the Year, Cade Palmer, in that TCA playoff game where they went to Colorado Springs and upset arguably the number 1 offense in the entire state. And so let me talk about kind of some of his signature games here, because he did have a lot. Against Resurrection Christian, they lost this one 14-24, but he did have 15 total tackles against Res. And then I don't believe he forced any turnovers there, but still 15 tackles against a tough team. Gotta give him respect there. Against Eden, now the scoreboard doesn't reflect how close this game was. They did lose 31-0, but in their defense, it did come down to 3 goal line stands here that they just simply didn't win. And so that's how that game turned out. But in that game, he had 22 total tackles. 18 of those were solo tackles, which is, geez, man, that's hard to do because Eden has a very good offensive line and very good running backs too, multiple. So there you go there. And then finally against TCA, this was the big upset where they did travel down to Colorado Springs. 8 total tackles in that game. Had that forced fumble, like I said. Also had the interception that would seal that game and put away TCA for good. And move on to the next round where unfortunately they did lose to Brush. Still got a forced fumble and an interception in that game against Brush as well. But, Caden Donovan definitely did his thing all year. He does it all. He's a ball hawk. He hits hard. He's just one of those dudes that comes out there and he's ready to work. And he's one of the reasons why this Severance culture is the way it is and will hopefully be the way it is for the next couple years. And that is a tough defense with a bunch of playmakers all around, with him being one of the founding members of that team. So there you go, Caden Donovan from Severance. Now I'm going to go ahead and throw it back to Kodey to talk about another Defensive Playmaker of the Year finalist.
Yeah, and this one is, still in the secondary, but at the cornerback position. Talking about Giovanni Mendoza out of Valley High School, located in Gilcrest, Colorado. And, he was balling this year, honestly. I actually watched his film while looking at the top 5 cornerbacks list, and I'd say that he's definitely an honorable mention in that case because, this year in the secondary, he had 8 interceptions across, 5 different games, which is insane, including 3 games where he had 2 interceptions apiece. And, just being so explosive after catching the football, on those interceptions, he was actually able to take 3 of those to the house. So, almost 50% of his interceptions ended up being points. Not to mention, on special teams, he did take 2 kickoff returns to the house. And he's just an incredible athlete for this Valley team. But talking about some great performances, he had 2 interceptions against Alameda for 49 return yards. And then in a game against Wiggins, which I know is a 1A school, but they're a dang good 1A school with their, offensive playmaker and defensive Playmaker of the Year winners over there. Please listen to that episode for more on those guys. But, he did have a pass deflection and a fumble recovery. So, he's able to, he has a nose for the football is basically what I'm trying to say. And it turned into a lot of opportunities for this team. And I think it was especially important in this game against Fort Lupton where he had 2 interceptions and 95 interception return yards. That was a win for this Valley team against Fort Lupton, and without Gio's play in that game, who knows if they end up winning that game. So that's Giovanni Mendoza, the speedy defensive back out of Valley. Now I'm going to toss it to Mason Austin to talk about our last Defensive Playmaker of the Year candidate for 21.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about another Eaton boy over here, defensive end Ryan Dirksen, who had 113 total tackles, 20 tackles for loss, 13.5 sacks, 2 hurries, a forced fumble, and 3 recovered fumbles on the year. But I think one of his biggest things is that in 6 separate games, he had at least 11 tackles this season, being University, Brush, Elizabeth, Berthoud, Resurrection, Christian, and Platte Valley. All of them having at least 11, a couple of them more than that. Then every single game this year that is recorded on here, he has at least 0.5 of a sack. 13.5 sacks. That's pretty good. He has a couple games with 2. The University game, he has 1.5. In the last game of the season where they did take the state championship, he had 2. Statistically, defensively, he's pretty insane. He has 3 fumble recoveries for 55 return yards. And then not to mention that he does get it done on the offensive side of the ball, running it for him. But, he's up for Defensive Playmaker of the Year. I think that is all I have to say on Ryan Dirksen. I think I'm going to go ahead and say Anthony's pick, if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, cool. So Anthony did go ahead and pick Ryan Dirksen, and I am going to second that with my pick. I think that he got it done for this Eaton squad, and he's definitely the best defensive player on that Eaton squad. Not to say anyone else on Eaton is slouches, because that defense is insane, as it was shown in the state championship game. But I definitely think he was their top guy. I think I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Simon to talk about his votes.
Yeah, so I'm not even gonna lie. I was really close to voting for Ryan Dirksen. I obviously went to the most Eden games this year, and probably the most football games for a single team this year on the high school level. And so I got to watch him a lot, and I know some of the guys around him as well. He's one of those guys that I used to. Well, actually, I don't think I used to teach, but he's someone that I'm very familiar with because I have other friends who used to teach him. But Ryan Dirksen here, definitely a beast. Easily one of the reasons why Eden was able to go back to back in that state game. He was absolutely huge, but I think that Eden defense didn't necessarily revolve just around Ryan Dirksen, because you also have Morgan Trebet, Lucas Cass, Ryder True, who's only a junior. He might be a guy that could make this list the next year, as a senior. And then, my boy Brogan Bar, Dirk Duncan. It's a very complete team over there. And so with that, I guess, logic here, I'm actually going to go the other way here and go with Caden Donovan out of Severance. Obviously, they have some players there that help that Severance defense out a lot. But Caden Donovan, in my opinion, really held down the back end of that defense, didn't allow a lot of big plays there, and kind of just kept everything, short, and allowing his teammates to, do their thing as well. But I'm going to go ahead and vote for Caden Donovan out of Severance. And with that being said, I'm also going to talk about the fan vote here, because it was really interesting. And so let me kind of tell you how it went down here. So about 24 hours before the polls ended, I did post screenshots updating, on our Instagram, just updating where those polls were. At the time, Ryan Dirksen was actually leading, I want to say at 33% or something like that. And so I posted that update. I was like, hey, 24 hours until the polls close, make sure you vote on our Twitter if you haven't yet, just because, we don't want to miss any votes. And so 24 hours later, Caden Donovan actually pulls ahead in those 24 hours, jumping up by almost 10%, which is pretty insane here. But he did win the fan vote with 38% here. So congrats to Caden Donovan. He did win the fan vote for Defensive Playmaker of the Year. Ryan Dirksen, he wasn't super far away. He had 30%. Giovanni Mendoza had 27%. And then Kodey Connor did have 5% there. And so this was a really close poll here. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and throw it to Kodey, and we'll see whether that poll mattered or not. It matters. But whether it'll swing this vote or not. So, Kodey, who are you picking to break this tie here for Defensive Playmaker of the Year?
Can I get a drum roll, please?
Yeah.
Mason, can I get a drum roll? Can I get a drum roll?
We're not in sync enough for that. Just say say who's gonna win it. Go for it.
Anyways, your Playmakers Corner 21 Defensive Playmaker of the Year is Caden Donovan, is who I'm going to cast my final vote for here. Caden, shout out to Ryan Dirksen, Gio, and Kodey. All those guys balled out this year, and there's a reason why they're on this list. You don't just get put on as a candidate because you're just there. You get put on because you were a playmaker all year. So shout out to all those guys. But I'm going to have to give it to Caden. He's somebody who, Simon said it all, and, the fans said it all with their actions and with their votes. He was just phenomenal this year and crucial to, Severance's run, I think, just in general, of everything that he did, both offensively and defensively. But defensively, he's a do-it-all safety, who can intercept passes, he can hit hard, he can play in the box, he can help cover and just play a variety of different things, and is, a very true safety through and through. And as far as playing your role perfectly, Caden did exactly that this year. Not to mention in that, I think it was like, it's like an East-West kind of bowl thing that they have on the 2A level or whatever. He had an interception in that, like, you know, all-star game, basically. And I think that's very indicative of just, you know, even against the best of the best competition in 2A, he's still able to make plays. I mean, it was a double-tipped bobble diving interception that he made, and that's just the kind of hustle that he has to his game and, you know, the kind of intensity that he can bring to any football program and is must-see football. Caden Donovan for Defensive Playmaker of the Year.
He also had an interception in the Blue-Gray All-American game this last week.
Hey, how about that?
Yeah, so shout out to him. No, shout out to all these finalists. Honestly, this was a tough list, and I think it's only going to get tougher, you know, but all these guys definitely deserve to win it. I mean, Giovanni Mendoza, he won games for his team as a cornerback, which that just doesn't happen. You know, Kodey Connor coming off that torn meniscus, that's absolutely insane. Ryan Dirksen, repeating with Eden and doing his thing and stepping up when Morgan Trebet had to come off because I know he did struggle with some injury issues this year. And so all these guys are super deserving. And also some of these guys that, you know, were in consideration of this were super deserving as well. But congratulations to Caden Donovan out of Severance. Now, Mason, Kodey, is there anything else you want to add before we take a break and then talk about MVP this year?
No, I think I'm good.
All right, sounds good. Coming up next, Most Valuable Playmaker of the Year on the 2A level. What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Playmakers Corner podcast. This is our 2A End of the Year award show, episode 95, and we're going to talk about the Most Valuable Playmaker of the Year finalists here. I feel like I shouldn't have to say what this means, but basically, you know, MVP, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and talk about the first finalist here, and that is senior university quarterback Greg Garza on the year. He had 2,589 passing yards, 27 passing touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Also had 404 rushing yards and 17 rushing touchdowns. So on the year, I believe he had 42 total touchdowns. I want to say these passing yards and maybe the touchdowns also led 2A in those two categories. And then the 42 total touchdowns, I want to say, led 2A in total touchdowns as well. And so that's Greg Garza. You know, I'm just going to be honest with you. He lit it up this season. He was a big reason why University was making the run. And, you know, I did do a University spotlight really early on in the season. I said, hey, if this University team could get it going with Greg Garza and his receivers, shout out to them, by the way, Logan Getting, Tate Chacon, Cannon Padilla, all those guys, you know, but if he could get it going, this is a dangerous team, you know, and I said they would be a dark horse team if they could get it going, and that kind of depends on Greg Garza. And, you know, Greg Garza, he proved me right. You know, he turns it up this season with multiple big games against Manitou Springs, who they beat 43-0. He did throw for 195 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns, did throw 1 interception though. Had 8 yards on the ground, so nothing too crazy there. But against Eden, the first time around, you know, he had a very solid performance against them. Now, I don't think it'll show necessarily on the stat line, but he did go 12 of 22 for 190 passing yards. Did throw 1 interception though, but he would rush for 2 rushing touchdowns in that game. You know, a lot of his passes were wide. University was able to control the clock and, you know, move the ball well against a very tough Eden defense in their own stadium. In University Stadium. And then they would go back to Eden to face off with them in the playoffs here. in that game, he threw for the most passing yards in his last game of his high school career. He won 25 of 42 for 382 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. One of those interceptions was kind of a Hail Mary at the end of a half, and then the other one would end up sealing that game. But he would also run for 30 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns in that game against Eden, where they just came up short of going to state. And so Greg Garza, he did his thing. I wouldn't necessarily say carried this university team, but he was a big reason why they were as successful as they were this year. Also, big shout out to him, man. He's a real nice guy, big fan of the podcast and whatnot. He did tell us a couple of times throughout the playoffs how he appreciated us, supporting them as the dark horses, because they did upset 2 other teams in Delta and Moffat County, leading to their, showdown with Eden one more time in Eden, by the way. And Moffat County, they had a playmaker of their own over there. Kodey, do you want to go ahead and talk about this Moffat County star over there that's only a junior?
I would be delighted to. I think that this guy, I'm pretty sure he won a Playmaker of the Week at some point during the season, because he went on a tear. I'm talking about, as Simon alluded to, Moffat County's own Evan Atkin, who I'm pretty sure led the state in touchdowns that weren't a quarterback, with 29 rushing touchdowns this year, as well as 3 receiving touchdowns on the offensive side of the ball. He was unstoppable, basically, running for 1,341 yards, as well as catching another 336 yards. So, you're looking at nearly 1,700 yards of scrimmage and over 30 touchdowns, which is just absurd, for any one player, in Colorado football. And then on the defensive side of the ball, he was also a contributor there. So being able to play both ways is obviously super important to us here at Playmakers Corner for MVP candidates. And on the defensive side of the ball, he had 58 tackles, 3.5 for loss, 2 sacks, and 2 interceptions. So, at that linebacker spot, he was kind of able to do it all. But, talking about this year, oh my Lord, he was just a monster. Every game, he ran for a touchdown. Every game, at least one. And, only twice did he only run for a single touchdown in a game. The rest of the games, he ran at least 2 touchdowns. I'm just going to go through the list here and go Northfield, 3 touchdowns. Steamboat Springs, 3 touchdowns. Win, by the way. Rollins, 2 touchdowns. Kennedy, 3 touchdowns and a win. Basalt, 3 touchdowns and a win. I think that's when he actually won Playmaker of the Week, I want to say. Because, that was a huge game for both of these teams. I believe both went in undefeated or only with 1 loss. And Moffat County came out with a dub against a very good Basalt team, in my opinion. Then 4 touchdowns against Rifle, who was the champions last year. Then beating Aspen, 4 touchdowns. In a loss to Delta, he ran for only a single touchdown. In a big win against Coal Ridge, he ran for 5. And in a loss to University, he ran for touchdowns. This Moffat County team came and went with Evan Atkin. He was the, MVP of this team at the bare minimum, as you could tell by their only 2 losses being the games where he only runs for 1 touchdown, which is crazy. As far as receiving goes, he had a massive receiving game against Rifle in particular, where he caught for over 115 yards and a pass catching touchdown, putting his total at 5 on the day. Maybe that's when he won Playmaker of the Week. I mean, he was honestly a candidate like every single week, and helped this Moffat County team be pretty dang legit. And on his film, he's a great back. He's very strong. He stiff arms people into the ground all the time, like straight up. He stiff arms players so hard that their parents don't want to talk about that play after the game, kind of level stiff arm. So he's a dog like that. Very strong, hard to tackle. There's one play where I'm pretty sure 7 people get their hands on him or try and hit him, and he stays standing and breaks off a long run. Just an explosive big play threat who I would not be surprised to see him here 2 years in a row as a candidate. But with all that being said, I'm going to pass it off to Mason to talk about another player from that university squad. 2 guys from that university squad who are MVP candidates for Most Valuable Playmaker. Mason?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and talk about Kenan Padilla, defensive back from University High School. He had 177 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown, but then he had 892 receiving yards with 11 receiving touchdowns. That is pretty good for a wide receiver. And then on the defensive side, he had 78 total tackles with 8 interceptions, 55 of those tackles being solo tackles, and he also caused 1 fumble. He definitely gets it done. They don't have his specific games on here that he got everything done, so there's not a lot I can say when it comes to that, but he did end up getting it done for the kicking and punt returning. He got 368 yards this year and a long of 91. So that's pretty good. He did not get a touchdown, but 91 yards is an insane kick return. So there's not a lot I could say because they don't have, specific games or anything, but he definitely played for a great university squad, and he definitely was a huge part in one of the reasons that they were winning. I'm going to pass this back to Simon to go ahead and talk about our last most valuable playmaker.
All right. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about our last finalist here. That is Resurrection Christian's very own, by the way, athlete is what I'm going to go ahead and label him as, Eddie Lemos. He played quarterback for this team. He played quarterback for this team, even though it probably wasn't playing super early on. And then obviously he did play a bit of defense as well. But let me talk about his offensive stats first. On the year, he had 418 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns. Also had 1,431 rushing yards and 22 rushing touchdowns. Obviously, that's that's really hard to do at the quarterback position. So you just got to keep that in mind. And also, he had 7 passing touchdowns, if I wasn't mistaken. Well, I was mistaken, so just keep that in mind. Not 7 passing touchdowns. So there you go. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, he still did his thing. There were a couple games here where he was a little bit banged up, so he just played offense. But he still had 36 total tackles on the year, which is pretty solid. Also had 3 interceptions this season as well, as he was doing it all for this Resurrection Christian team. That was surging, throughout the regular season and in the playoffs. Obviously, they lost to Brush, who would end up going to state. But overall, Eddie Lemos was a big reason why this Resurrection team was just able to do as well as they could. They did lose their quarterback in the offseason and whatnot, and so for Eddie to come in here and do his thing, that is absolutely huge. I'm just going to say this right now. We are actually probably going to do a Wildcat quarterback / running quarterback top 5 list to add it on to our seniors list of this year, and Eddie Lemos will for sure be on there, because he's just an athlete, and that list will also hopefully help out guys who just are athletes and play positions like Eddie Lemos here. But with that being said, let me go ahead and talk about the fan vote here, because it was pretty close here. It went to Greg Garza. He got 39% of the fan vote, which was really good. And so Greg Garza is your fan MVP award winner. So there you go. And then right behind him was his teammate Kenan Padilla from University at 35%. So that's a really, really close margin there. If you look at that, you could argue it both ways. But, Greg Garza, he did his thing on offense. Kenan Padilla, he did his thing on offense and defense as well. So there you go there. Eddie Lemos is right behind with 23%. And then Evan Atkin at 3%. Pretty sure we couldn't find Evan Atkin on any of his socials. So if you do find him, you should send him our way, because we'd love to connect with him. So there you go there. I'm going to go ahead and talk about who I voted for here. I'm going to go ahead and vote for Greg Garza. Look, he was an absolute beast. Obviously defensively, you could always do your thing there, but on offense, especially when you're an offense built like University. You need a quarterback to step up when you need him. He made a lot of big throws in that Eden game. There was a time where he went blow for blow with Walker Martin in that first half. They were just trading touchdowns, and arguably that might have been one of the best quarterback duels of the entire season in all of Colorado, if I'm being completely honest with you. And for Greg Garza to keep up and do his thing against a fierce and extremely tough Eden defense in Eden, by the way, which was rocking after pretty much every 50-yard touchdown pass, that's pretty insane. And I'm just going to throw this memory out there as well. Greg Garza had a very Johnny Manziel-esque kind of play where Morgan Trebet and Ryan Dirksen were both crashing down on him. He spun out of both of their tackles, and then he shook off someone's hand. I don't know if it was Lucas Cass or somebody on the defensive line that was pushing as well, but he spun out of those tackles from two excellent defensive ends, rolled out to his left, which, by the way, he's a righty, and then went ahead and threw an absolute dot to a wide-open receiver to keep that drive alive, which would end up with a touchdown in that scoring flurry early on in that game. And so that's why I'm voting for Greg Garza as the most valuable playmaker. Kodey or Mason, do you want to talk about your picks for MVP?
I'll talk about it.
No, I want to talk about it, so.
Why?
I don't know. Go ahead, Kodey.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Anyways, I'm going to be the third and basically gavel slamming vote here for Greg Garza. I mean, look, the dude scored 44 touchdowns. There's not a whole lot you could say after that, between running and passing the football. Good God, that's so many touchdowns. I mean, there's maybe 6 players in the entire state who had over 40 total touchdowns, all being quarterbacks, and they're all elite playmakers here. And Greg Garza is one of those guys and is my vote for Playmaker of the Year / Most Valuable Playmaker on this 2A level. There's just nothing that he couldn't do, and yeah, no, he balled out. So, Mason, you want to talk about yours and Anthony's votes here?
Yeah, no, I'll go right ahead, and I'll just say that Anthony and I both picked, Greg Garza to go ahead and make it unanimous. There's nothing that hasn't been said. Woo! This dude's an absolute dog. So, congratulations, Greg Garza, and everyone else that's on this list. You guys were deserving of it as well. You just had to go up against the juggernaut. So,
yeah. I mean, I'm just going to be honest with you. If it didn't rain in Eden, and basically for that entire fourth quarter, which almost never happens, because it was literally raining at the start of it, and then right when the game ended, it stopped raining, basically. University might have been able to go to state. They were a lot closer than I think the scoreboard showed against Eden in that game. Eden, they're Eden, so they're going to control the ball well, and they're going to play good football in general. But Greg Garza, man, did he lit it up. And he was trying for that, fantastic senior story here, but unfortunately he just came short. But doesn't matter. He does win MVP here. He just had an excellent season. And, he's somebody that might make our top 5 senior list. I'm just going to be honest here. 4 quarterbacks, which would be a first because we never had somebody below the 3A level make our top 5 senior quarterback list. So yeah. But Kodey, Mason, is there anything else you want to add on here before we move on here? Oh, one more thing. I'm just going to go ahead and go over all the winners real quick. So congratulations to all these guys. Newcomer of the Year. Newcomer of the Year. Sorry, I almost forgot. Ty Reed. Offensive Playmaker of the Year, Cade Palmer. Defensive Playmaker of the Year, Caden Donovan. And then Most Valuable Playmaker of the Year on the 2A level in this 2021 season, Greg Garza from University. Now, is there anything else that you, Mason, or Kodey want to add on as we wrap this thing up?
I'd just like to say shout out to everybody that voted on our polls. y'all are killing it, and we're gonna keep posting them for every division. So let's get those numbers up even more.
Yes. No. Yeah, I appreciate the fan engagement on our Twitter and just overall support you guys bring. You know, just listening to our podcast, whether it be on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, or Apple Podcasts. You know, following us and subscribing so that you get notifications on new episodes, and, you know, following us on social media and retweeting these polls on Twitter at Playmaker Corner, or, you know, seeing that we're posting those polls when we share it to our Instagram story at Playmakers Corner, or if you see it through Facebook on Playmakers Corner, because our stories share through to both. And, you know, also we appreciate you guys going to our TikTok and watching the TikToks that we've been making for our top 5 Playmakers of the senior class for our, you know, award show episodes. Shout out to Simon for killing those, by the way. Those have been clutch. And yeah, just in general, thank you for all the support. And we are actually recording this on Christmas Eve, and it'll be coming out on Monday. So happy belated Christmas and happy holidays from us here at the Playmakers Corner. Thank you so much for listening to this award show. Stay tuned for our 3A, 4A, and 5A award show, as well as the rest of our top 5s coming out. And, you know, we had a really long meeting about all of our content for the next year, so stay tuned. We have so much more for you guys and can't wait. But,
well, we should probably say this right now, but you know, you should go ahead and follow our YouTube channel. I think you actually said that, but also because we are also looking to probably live stream on that sooner than later. On those live streams, we'll probably take requests there and do film breakdowns live so that you could see our process, see how we go through it, at least in its rawest form, since you know, we're not going to spend like an hour on each player. But there you go there. And then hopefully maybe Twitch as well in this next year, but be on the lookout for that. So yeah. I've been your co-host, Simon Villanos, aka Coach V.
I'm your other co-host, Mason Austin.
I was seeing it. That was a game of chicken that we just played. But anyways, I am the other co-host, Kodey Stoffer. Thank you so much. Happy holidays and happy New Year. No, you'll hear from us before the New Year.
This is our last live recording before the New Year. Well, no, it's not, because me and Mason haven't recorded next week's episode yet.
So, listen to that episode coming up later this week, and Happy New Year's.
Boom.